I've always been a bit of a night owl. There's a certain peace you can only find when the rest of the world is asleep. My go-to for clearing my head was always a late-night walk. My town is pretty small, and I've lived here my whole life, so I always felt safe. There was a network of trails just behind my neighborhood, winding through a thick patch of woods. It was my favorite spot. During the day, it was bustling with joggers and dog walkers, but at night, it was just me and the quiet hum of nature. One night, maybe a little after midnight, I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The air was cool and crisp, and the moon was bright enough that I didn't even need a flashlight. I walked down my street onto the main road and then cut into the trailhead. The entrance is right next to this old, dilapidated park that nobody's used in years. Rusty swing sets, a broken seesaw. It has that classic spooky vibe, but I was used to it. The first part of the trail runs along the edge of these woods, but then it forks. One path leads back towards town, and the other goes deeper into the forest. I almost always took the deeper path. That night, something felt different. The usual chirping of crickets was gone. There was just this heavy, oppressive silence. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself I was just being dramatic. I kept walking, the crunch of leaves under my boots the only sound. After about 10 minutes, I reached the part of the trail that was completely engulfed by the trees. The moonlight barely pierced through the canopy, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the breeze. It was here that I first heard it. It was a scream. But it wasn't a normal scream, like someone was in pain or being attacked. It was just a single, sharp, piercing shriek. It lasted for maybe 2 seconds and then stopped abruptly. My heart hammered against my ribs. I froze, every muscle tensed, straining my ears for any other sound. Nothing, just the wind rustling the leaves. I told myself it was probably some kids messing around, a prank. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. I decided to turn back. I wasn't in the mood for a late-night adventure anymore. As I started walking back, I heard it again. The exact same scream from the same direction. It was closer this time. A cold dread washed over me. This didn't feel like a prank. It felt intentional. I picked up my pace, my walk turning into a brisk jog. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my imagination running wild with every snap of a twig. The trail felt 10 times longer on the way back. My lungs burned, and I just wanted to be back under the streetlights, back in civilization. I finally burst out of the woods, back onto the main road. I was gasping for air, leaning against a light pole to catch my breath. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The logical part of my brain was already trying to rationalize it. A fox, maybe? A strange bird? But deep down, I knew that wasn't it. That was a human sound. As I stood there, calming my racing heart, I looked across the street. And that's when I saw him. There was a man standing on the other side of the road, partially hidden in the shadows of a large oak tree. He was just watching me. He was tall, wearing a dark hoodie that obscured his face. He didn't move. He didn't wave. He just stood there, perfectly still, like a statue. A new wave of fear, colder and sharper than before, hit me. This was different from the unseen threat in the woods. This was real. This was a person, and he was focused on me. I didn't wait to see what he would do. I pushed myself off the light pole and started running. I didn't run towards my house. I was too scared to lead him right to my door. Instead, I ran in the opposite direction, down the main street, towards the more populated part of town. I didn't look back. I was too afraid of what I might see. I just ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, the sound echoing in the silent night. After a few blocks, I risked a quick glance over my shoulder. He was gone. The spot under the oak tree was empty. I slowed to a walk, my body trembling. I tried to tell myself that maybe he was just some random person out for his own late-night walk. But I knew that was a lie. The way he stood, the way he watched me. It was predatory. I took a long roundabout way home, constantly checking my surroundings, my paranoia at an all-time high. Every shadow looked like a person. Every car seemed to slow down as it passed me. When I finally got to my front door, I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the lock. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking the deadbolt and every other lock I had. I leaned against the door, my heart still pounding like a drum. I went through the house, checking every window, making sure they were all locked, pulling the curtains shut. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. I couldn't sleep that night. I just sat on my couch, staring at the front door, listening to every creak and groan of the house. Around 3 a.m., just as I was starting to drift off, I heard it. A soft knock at my back door. Tap, tap. My blood ran cold. My back door faces the woods. The same woods where I heard the scream. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just sat there, frozen in terror. The knocking came again, a little louder this time. Tap, tap. I crept to the kitchen window that looks out onto the backyard. Peeking through a tiny gap in the blinds, I saw him, the man from the road. He was standing on my back porch, his face still hidden by the hood. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity. Then he slowly raised his hand and knocked again. I flinched, pulling away from the window. I grabbed my phone and hid in my closet, my hands shaking as I dialed 911. I whispered to the dispatcher, telling them someone was trying to break into my house. They said they would send a patrol car immediately. The minutes I spent waiting in that closet were the longest of my life. I could hear footsteps on the porch, a soft creaking as he walked back and forth. I was convinced he was going to break the glass and come inside. Then I heard the distant siren. The footsteps on the porch stopped. I heard the sound of someone running, crashing through the bush at the edge of my yard, back towards the woods. When the police arrived, he was long gone. They searched the area but found nothing. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. They took my statement, but I could tell they were skeptical. A spooky scream in the woods, a shadowy figure, a knock on the door. It sounded like something out of a horror movie. They told me to call if anything else happened, and then they left. I didn't sleep for days after that. The safety of my home felt violated. My peaceful little town now seemed menacing. The woods I used to love now filled me with a deep, primal fear. For a while, things were quiet. I started to think maybe it was all a one-time thing, a terrifying but isolated incident. I tried to get back to normal, but I never went on a late-night walk again. About a month later, it started again. Not every night, but randomly. A soft knock at the back door, always late at night. Tap. Tap. I'd call the police, and by the time they arrived, there was never anyone there. It was like a psychological game. It was a constant reminder that he was out there, that he knew where I lived, and that he could get to me whenever he wanted. The screams in the woods, the figure on the road, the knocks on my door, they were all connected. It wasn't just a random encounter. It was personal. I was being hunted. I don't know who he is or what he wants. All I know is that the peace I once found in the night is gone, replaced by a constant, gnawing fear. And every time the sun goes down, I can't help but listen for that soft, terrifying knock on my door. It was past 2:30 in the morning when I canceled the ride. It had been 10 minutes. Nobody had shown up. I was sitting in my car in a part of town that was already quiet during the day, let alone in the dead of night. The only sounds were the hum of my engine and the occasional rustle of leaves in the thick rolling fog that blanketed everything. Just silence and fog. It was eerie. I'd been a rideshare driver for almost 3 years, and you get a sixth sense for certain situations. This felt off. The pickup was a residential street, but it was bordered by a dense patch of woods, and the whole vibe was just wrong, so I did what my gut was screaming at me to do. I canceled the ride, put the car in drive, and started to head back toward the main road, ready to call it a night. Not even 30 seconds later, my phone chimed with that familiar Pavlovian sound. Another request popped up. Same area, just a mile down the road. The new pin was on a smaller, unpaved side street that branched off the one I was just on. It felt too coincidental. I pulled over and just stared at my screen. My gut, which had been yelling just a moment before, was now in full-on panic mode. It said no. It said drive away and don't look back. But my tired brain, the part that was thinking about rent and bills, said something else. It said, It's probably just a GPS glitch. The first passenger probably realized their PIN was in the wrong spot and re-requested. It was a logical explanation. It made sense. And after a long, slow night, the promise of one last fare was hard to ignore. So I hit accept. I turned the car around, the headlights cutting a weak path through the fog. The moment my tires hit the gravel of that side road, the world changed. The few streetlights I'd passed disappeared completely. The road felt longer than it should have. It was a straight shot, according to the map on my phone, but it just kept going. My GPS arrow was moving, but the road didn't seem to end. There were no houses, no mailboxes, no signs of life at all. Just dense, dark trees pressing in on both sides, their branches like skeletal fingers reaching for my car. The only sounds were the crunch of gravel under my tires and the sound of my own breathing, which was getting louder and more ragged with every passing second. The air in the car felt heavy, thick. I rolled the window down for a second, thinking I needed some fresh air, but the outside air was even colder, damper, and smelled of wet earth and decay. I quickly rolled it back up. Then, the map flickered. For just a second, the entire screen went black. My heart leaped into my throat. When it came back on, the layout was different. The pickup pin was still ahead of me, but the drop-off pin, it was behind me, back where I had just come from. I didn't have time to process what that meant before the GPS voice, usually so calm and robotic, glitched. It stuttered. Recalculating. Turn back. Turn back? The voice was distorted, like it was being fed through a meat grinder. It wasn't the usual, make a U-turn when possible. It was a command, a desperate, broken plea. Turn back. I slammed on the brakes. My car skidded on the loose gravel, fishtailing slightly before coming to a stop. My eyes were glued to the road ahead where my headlights had finally caught something. In the middle of the road, maybe 50 feet away, someone was standing. A man. He was wearing a gray hoodie, the hood pulled up low over his face. He was holding a phone, and its screen cast a faint, sickly blue light on his features, just enough to show his face. He wasn't looking at his phone, though. He was looking right at me. He didn't move. He didn't wave me down. He just stood there, motionless, a silhouette against the fog, staring. The hair on my arms stood straight up. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to reverse, to get out of there. Then, my phone chimed again, a different chime this time. A notification. I glanced down. The ride request, the one I had just accepted, had vanished from my screen. It was just gone, canceled. My eyes snapped back up to the figure in the road. He was still there, still staring. And that's when I realized the cold, terrifying truth. He wasn't a passenger. He wasn't waiting for a ride. The first request, the one I had canceled, was bait. A lure to bring a driver to this isolated spot. He was waiting for whoever was desperate enough or foolish enough to accept the second request, the one that was just a little further down the road. He was waiting for me. I didn't wait to see what would happen next. I threw the car into reverse and floored it, not caring about the trees or the ditch, my tires spinning and screaming on the gravel as I backed out of there as fast as I could. I never looked in my rearview mirror. I just drove. I didn't stop until the sun came up and I was on the other side of the county. I quit driving that day. And sometimes, when it's late and quiet, I can still hear that glitched voice in my head. Turn back, turn back. It was a quiet, rainy night, the kind that makes every shadow look alive. Every drop of water hitting the pavement sound like a footstep. I'd just come back from a late coffee run, my car a little bubble of warmth against the cold, wet world outside. As I pulled into the driveway, something caught my eye, a detail that was so small, so insignificant, yet it sent a shiver straight down my spine. One window upstairs was glowing, my bedroom light. The same room I hadn't even stepped into all day, and I knew, I was absolutely certain I'd turned it off before leaving. For a second, I just froze in the car, engine still running. The rain tapping on the windshield suddenly sounded less like weather and more like a nervous drumbeat. My mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe I'd forgotten. Maybe I was so tired I just didn't remember flipping the switch. It happens, right? We all have those moments of autopilot. But the feeling in my gut told me this was different. I finally convinced myself it was probably a reflection from the streetlights, distorted by the rain on the glass. Yeah, that had to be it. Taking a deep breath, I turned off the car and went inside. The house was silent. The only sound was the muffled drumming of the rain on the roof. I dropped my keys on the counter and, driven by that nagging feeling, went straight upstairs. I checked every single switch, the hallway, the bathroom, my bedroom. Everything was off. The room was dark, just as I'd left it. I even laughed a little, a nervous, quiet sound that got swallowed by the silence of the house. I told myself I was being paranoid, just spooked by the dark and the rain. I went back downstairs, deciding to forget the whole thing and just watch some TV. But as the night dragged on, that feeling started creeping in again. It was that primal, unsettling sense that someone was behind me. The feeling you get when you're walking down a dark street alone. Every time I looked over my shoulder at the empty hallway behind the couch, nothing was there. Just shadows playing tricks on my eyes. The floorboards upstairs would creak, and I'd tell myself it was just the house settling, the wood expanding and contracting with the temperature change. But tonight, every normal house sound felt intentional, sinister. Around midnight, my eyes were getting heavy, and I decided to go to bed. I turned off the TV, plunging the living room into near darkness. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my hand on the banister, ready to head up, and that's when it happened. A light upstairs flicked off by itself. It wasn't a flicker. It wasn't a bulb dying with a final buzzing sigh. It was a clean switch, a distinct click, followed by the sudden disappearance of the light that had been spilling from the top of the stairs. The same light I had just confirmed was off. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears, a frantic, panicked rhythm. Every instinct screamed at me to run, to get out of the house. But a stupid, morbid curiosity took over. I had to know, still. I went up. Each step was a monumental effort. The air upstairs felt heavy, thick, and cold. I reached the top of the landing and fumbled for the hallway light switch, my fingers trembling. The hallway lit up, and that's when I noticed the bedroom door. It was halfway open. I always close it, always. Inside the room, something moved. A flicker of motion in the corner of my eye. The closet door, which had been shut tight, creaked just a little, a sliver of darkness widening. And that's when I saw him. A man, pale, filthy, with long, tangled hair that hung over his face. He was wearing tattered clothes, and he had this empty smile, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, tilting his head from side to side, as if he were studying a strange new puzzle. Then, his voice, a dry, raspy whisper that cut through the silence, said, "I thought you weren't coming back tonight." I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe. I just ran. I turned and scrambled down the stairs, falling on the last few steps, scraping my hands on the floor. I didn't look back. I didn't care about my keys, my wallet, nothing. I just sprinted out the front door, into the cold, pouring rain, and got back in my car. I called the police, my voice shaking so badly I could barely form the words. My hands trembling so much I almost dropped the phone. When they arrived, the house was empty. The man was gone. They searched every room, every closet, the attic, the basement. Nothing. But the back door lock, it was smashed clean through. Not from the outside like a break-in. It was broken from the inside. Nothing was stolen. No jewelry, no electronics, no cash. There were no muddy footprints on the carpet despite the rain. There was no sign of where he came from or where he went. It was as if he just materialized inside my walls and then vanished. The police report called it a possible vagrant, but I knew it was something else. That smile, that wasn't just a person. I don't live there anymore. I couldn't, but sometimes late at night, when I'm driving past my old neighborhood, I still see it. The faint, unmistakable glow of that upstairs light, even when I know the house is empty, and the power has been turned off for months.